Hello and welcome. My name is Laura Doering and I am host of today's webinar, which the topic is Tune into your bird's daily routine. This is our first webinar, so bear with us, but I think it's going to go well. So chances are that your routine has changed quite a bit over the past few weeks, especially with the school closures and employers switching to a work at home schedule and self-isolation as the new normal. But one silver lining to all of this upheaval is that we get to spend a lot more time with our pets, with our pet birds, with our flock, and we can really use that positivity now. Research shows that the human-animal bond interaction can reduce psychological stress on a biological level, and it also can increase our oxytocin levels. That's the love hormone that, among other things, can help boost your mood and reduce stress. So now, instead of rushing out the door for work or for school drop-off, we're basically going from our bedroom to our living room or our kitchen or our den, and gives us a lot more time with the flock. So let's use this time to really tune into our birds and what they do during the day. And to that end, I am really excited to introduce our special guest on the topic, and that is Dr. Susan Lamb. Stephanie Lamb. She is a self-proclaimed bird nut, which is awesome because aren't we all bird nuts? And she is a certified avian practitioner in Arizona. And when not helping pet birds and their people, she's volunteering with wildlife organizations and talking to bird clubs. And lucky for us, she's also a contributor to LafeberPetBirds.com. She's a very busy person and an amazing animal crusader, and we cannot be thankful enough to have her with us today. Before we begin, there's a nice feature on the bottom of your screen, and that's a Q&A button. You can submit questions there during the webinar, and we'll hopefully get to them all during the end of the webinar. If we don't get to your question today, you can go to our webpage, and let me try a screen share. I'll show you where to go. You can put your question there, and we will answer it. During that time. Let's see here. Screen share. Oh, that's not what you want to see. Here we go. So if you go to our website, Pet Bird, right here, scroll over to the bird community and go to Ask Lafeber and submit your question there. All right. And also, just a reminder that please try to keep your question relevant to the topic. We do plan on doing more webinars in the future, so I'm sure that whatever question you have that might not be on this topic, we will answer coming in the weeks ahead. So, Stephanie, Dr. Lamb, let's take it away.
All right, thanks for having me on today. So yeah, we're gonna talk about how we can be watching our birds a little bit more closely and getting to understand their habits. You know, as you mentioned right now, a lot of people are at home and we can kind of take this as an opportunity to really observe our birds and start to understand them a little bit more. Now that we're forced to be home a little bit more than maybe some of us would like to be, we don't necessarily have to have that be a unfortunate circumstance. We can use that to our benefit and really get to have more positive interactions with our pets and learn a little bit more about them. So birds, just like people, will have specific habits that they like to do on a daily basis at the same time during the day, just like us. You know, everybody has some sort of morning ritual that they do, you know, whether it's you get up and the first thing you do is stretch, or you have to drink your coffee, or you need to read some newspaper or news article online, connecting with somebody in the morning time. We all have our patterns that are pretty habitual, even when we don't necessarily recognize that we have these patterns. We certainly have them. And our birds do the same thing. And we've known about this, particularly with birds in the wild, for centuries. You know, naturalists who have been watching birds in the wild know certain times of day are better to see birds in particular locations, see birds finding their food, foraging, what have you, or expecting to find birds doing grooming behaviors, nesting behaviors, mating behaviors. And they do these things at very, particular times of day, sort of habitually. It allows an animal, when they do something on a routine, to really maximize their activities and get the most out of their day. So our pet birds in our homes really do like to follow routines. And when we're at home and watching them, we can get a little bit better idea of what exactly it is they're doing throughout the day now that we're sitting at home with them a bit more. Things that are good to be watching for are, when is it that they like to eat? Do they have certain food items that they're eating at particular times of day? Do they pick certain food items out of their food dish over other items that they like to go for first? When do they like to take naps? When do they like to play with their toys? Are there certain toys that they enjoy more so than others at certain times of day? Or are some things a bit random? There are times when birds are going to vary up their patterns a bit. And getting to know your individual bird and what times they're doing things, when they're performing particular activities, or when they are more likely to be having variation in their habits is really helpful, because if you start to understand what's normal, then it helps you to understand what's abnormal. And so we can use these habitual behaviors and things that they're doing to recognize when something might be wrong with one of our pet birds. And as an example of something that happened in my own personal flock, I have a few African grays, and one of my African grays, she is a pretty active bird. From the time that we open the cage in the morning time, she's pretty much out of the cage right away. She's walking around, she's doing things, she's foraging. She's just a very active individual. And she really likes her foraging toys. She's probably my best forager that I have. And she will use them really, really well. And one time I had opened the cage door in the morning time and she didn't come out right away. I didn't think too much of it initially because I myself was busy and had things going on. But as the day went along, I recognized that she wasn't really doing the normal things that she would do. She wasn't coming out as readily as I would have expected her to. And I recognized at one point that she hadn't touched any of her foraging toys, which was very odd. She's typically interacting with her foraging toys pretty quickly. And once I recognized that she wasn't interacting with those foraging toys, that made me go, okay, something's not quite right here. You're not fitting with your normal habits and normal routines. Let me investigate a little bit more. So I got her out of the cage, did an exam with her, and I recognized that she actually had a little fracture on the tip of her beak. And it was a little minor fracture, but it was still something that was causing her pain, a little bit of discomfort. And so because I recognized that she just wasn't doing her regular things during the day, it allowed me to pick up on something that was wrong with her. And then I fixed the little fracture that she had. We had to put a little patch over the tip of her beak so that the little sensitive nerve endings wouldn't be exposed. Got her a little bit of pain medication, and within a short period of time, she was then out of the cage, roaming around, doing her regular stuff, interacting with her foraging toys like nothing ever happened. And so had I have not picked up on the fact that her behaviors were a little different from her typical routine, she could have been in pain for a longer portion of the day. And had she have gone without eating for a longer portion of the day, we could have gotten ourselves into some trouble at some point. So it's a good thing to be able to understand what you know is normal for your bird, and then be able to understand when things aren't normal. And when they're not normal, that's when you can say, okay, we need to investigate a little bit deeper what's going on here, and either taking them into the vet to be seen, investigating a little bit more what's going around in the cage, if there's something off or something abnormal with the individual, and then going from there. So,
Dr. Lamb, I have a question for you. So it seems like for a lot of us that our schedules are kind of in upheaval, we might have a tendency to be staying up later than we typically would, because there's, you're calling in for meetings now, and you're instead of driving off to work. So if, let's say, we're getting in this habit of binge watching, shows on TV and such, a trickle down effect for our birds, what would be some signs that we need to look out that maybe are getting quality that they need because we're not keeping to a schedule that they might have been used to prior to all of this?
Yeah. So, and a good point to make with that is that it is good to remember that our birds are going to be affected by our schedule changing, and it's going to change their schedule. Birds do really need to have a good amount of sleep during their day, or in the evening time, and it's good for a lot of them to have sort of a set bedtime where they get to go to rest in a nice quiet area where there isn't a lot of noise, people moving around, that it's dark so that they can get a good solid night's sleep. Because if we are keeping them up later than typical, sometimes they can get a little cranky, as one of the just simple benign things. You might have an individual who is a little bit more short with their behaviors. What I mean by that is maybe you have an individual who's typically going to step up really nicely and want to interact and cuddle, and maybe they're a little less likely to want to step up. Maybe they're not, putting their foot up for you when you're asking them to step up. They're kind of ignoring you. They're being a little more distant. Or sometimes some individuals, when they're a little more cranky, get a little more vocal. They start squawking a little bit more, and hey, I really want to go to bed right now. I can tell you, one of my parrots, when we do disrupt her sleep at nighttime, she ends up saying good night in a very sort of annoyed manner. And we take that as, okay, we're bothering her. We need to have her have a little bit more of her rest. We do know in some other animals that if they don't get good quality sleep, it could affect your immune system. And if your immune system is being suppressed, then you're going to be a little bit more apt to potentially have problems like infections. So it's something that it's good to remember that we do need to be mindful of our birds' routines and make sure that we're not disrupting them too much.
Good point. So on another I guess example that we might kind of be going off schedule again on our own schedules is I've read a lot of articles, not a lot of, but I read some articles how we are tending to snack more throughout the day. We're walking by the kitchen more, we're picking up chips, whatever we're feeling the mood for. The trickle down effect to our birds on that, since they're seeing us snacking, especially, I used to have an Amazon parrot, and you ate anything in front of him, he wanted it, and he made you know that he wanted to have some of that. So just the fact that we might be snacking more, our birds might be more, asking, hey, I want to snack now too, and I want to snack what you're snacking, which might not be the best for them. How do we keep that in check?
Yeah, so it's good to remember that we don't want to overfeed our birds. They are prone to too many calories and putting on weight and having problems just like us if we're snacking too much. Particularly, as you mentioned, Amazons, they're very good at eating kind of whatever you want to give them. I know my Amazon as well, he will snack at any point in the day. He will eat tons of different snacks. So it's important to be mindful of how much we're actually offering them. And if you find that you are offering them a lot more treats than you normally would be throughout the day, because normally if you're not there and in the morning time, you just set out their set daily amount of food, and now you're there and you're giving them lots of treats where they wouldn't have gotten those treats before. One thing that you could potentially do is in the morning times, rather than just setting out their regular amount of food, maybe put down less. And then rather than giving them snacks throughout the day, you can give them some of their regular food. So they're still getting their full daily amount of calories that they would have been getting anyways, but now it's being spread out, and it can allow you to kind of have a little bit more of that bond still with your bird, because you feel like you're giving them something. You feel like you're giving them a treat, a reward, something to interact with them, but it's still just their regular food. So that's one good thing. Or low calorie foods is another thing. You know, keep in mind that a single almond is about 7 to 8 calories, which doesn't sound like a lot for a human. But when we're talking about like a typical Amazon parrot, their calorie need is going to be somewhere around like 50 to 80 calories a day, depending upon the size of your Amazon, which breed it is, what their nutritional needs are. And if one almond is 7 to 8 calories, that's a huge chunk of their caloric daily intake. So if you're giving them like 3 almonds a day, you've just given them a lot of their calorie needs. And so if we're going with a food item that is a lower calorie item, greens are a great thing to offer to birds. You know, cilantro, parsley, lettuces, they're very low calorie. Some birds love them and just love to tear them apart into little pieces. Some birds like to eat them. Some birds don't know what they are, but can learn to forage and interact with them and become a little bit more excited about some new thing that you're giving them. So that's another thing to keep in mind too, is that giving them something doesn't always have to be necessarily a food item. You can give them some sort of other like toy or something to interact with, as opposed to giving them food as a reward for something.
Nice. And as since if a goal is to kind of not overdo it on the calories, this might also, would you say, be a good time to interject some exercise routines into your bird's day, since we'll be doing that hopefully ourselves inside? Do you have any tricks for that?
Yeah, so it's definitely a good time to also take advantage of getting your bird out of the cage more, right? Getting them more active, whether it's walking around or flying around. If you have a bird that is clipped, you know, take them out. You can put them on their tree stand, allow them to interact on a play gym, you know, some out of the cage area where they're able to interact with toys, objects, see things out a window, or even just taking them off and put them on the ground and having them walk over to you. That's one really simple way to get exercise into your birds. Encourage them to walk over. If you have a bird that's flighted, and if they're trained to come to you, you can have them, you know, recall, just ask them to come land on your hand, you know. And another great thing right now is if you don't have a bird that is trained to do any of these recall behaviors or tricks, whatever you'd like to call them, you could work on this time now to start training them how to do behaviors and commands and trick training and everything. I mean, a lot of birds that are trick trained really enjoy it. They love like getting to interact with people, and when we make a connection with them where you can see that they understand what we're asking and we reward them for things that they do, like, I mean, you can just see it in their eyes and on their expressions of how excited they are that, oh my gosh, like, you know, I'm doing what they asked me to do. I know what they're saying. Like, we're communicating, we're connecting. This is awesome. You know, most birds really like that. It's a great way to connect. And so we could use this time now as well to maybe work on some of those things with our birds, teaching them how to do particular tricks and things.
Yes, I know that one trick that, or not trick, but one behavior that I think could be useful going forward is some birds seem pretty hesitant about going into a carrier. Like if you needed to, let's say you need to take it to the vet, or you need to go somewhere else during this time. Some birds are a little hesitant about going in carriers, right?
Yeah.
Maybe take some steps to get them comfortable with doing that in case you do need to move them.
Yeah, and it's a desensitizing them to things that could potentially be stressful, because some individuals see a carrier only when they're going to the vet or only when they're going to get groomed. And, you know, in veterinary hospitals and grooming facilities, we're trying to be as low stress as we possibly can because we want to keep our birds happy and nobody wants to be stressed. But it is still stressful for them sometimes to go to these places, or even if they haven't been to the vet before, it's their first time, it's scary just going out of your house sometimes. You know, you're used to your little home and now you're going out into this big world, and it can be a little nerve-wracking for some birds. So And the carrier sometimes becomes the thing that they pick up on and recognize that, oh my gosh, I only go on that carrier when scary things are happening. And so if we use this time to teach them that the carrier is not scary, the carrier can be a safe thing, that can really be to our benefit in the long run. And so having the carrier just sitting out in the room where they are is one way to just allow them to be able to see it, recognize it's not coming after them, not causing any problems. It's just a benign object that's sitting there. And then sometimes putting toys or treats in there to encourage them to go in. Um, Having them go into the carrier, you know, stepping them up, gently putting them into there, never being forceful with them to have them go into the carrier, just, you know, asking them to step down, go into the carrier, leaving the door open, talking with them, just letting them know that they're a good bird, stepping them up and having them come out, you know, and then, you know, just repeating that behavior. Or, you know, eventually we're at the point where you shut the door for a moment and maybe even pick up the cage, you walk around the house and you put it back down and they come back out and everything's great. You know, just really encouraging positive reinforcement so that they see that the carrier is just this object. It doesn't mean anything bad is going to happen. It doesn't mean anything scary is going to happen. We're just having fun right now. Everything's okay. And so then when it does come time to go to the veterinary office or the groomers, or for boarding, wherever you're going, it isn't as stress inducing for them. And they can be a lot calmer, more relaxed, which is going to be to their benefit.
Great. And then what about any kind of, because some of our birds now, if they're used to having frequent wing feather trims, and that's not necessarily something that's easy to do right now. Just some precautions that we can take if part of their daily habit is maybe spending time on top of their cage or on a play gym, and we're used to them being, you know, if they are used to having a wing feather trim, or you are, and now they're getting more flighted, is there any recommendations we can do to make sure that we're keeping them safe? You know, obviously, I mean, it's a good time to maybe do some target flying training because they might have some lift in those feathers, but any precautions that or extra steps we might take during this time?
Yeah. So if you aren't able right now, because, you know, really grooming is typically going to be something that's going to be, we can hold off on that for right now. And once we're out of this quarantine mode, then people will be able to start trimming their birds' wings again. But for right now, if you're not able to, and those flight feathers are coming in, things to be cautious about at home. You know, make sure that windows are closed, doors are closed so that nobody's flying out. If you're used to your bird having their wings trimmed and you keep a window open or a door open, be mindful of that now. Be mindful that, okay, these feathers are coming in. I need to keep the door shut. I need to keep the window shut so nobody is escaping. Other things too, make sure you have them when they're out of their cage in a room that's safe. Make sure if there's like ceiling fans or any sort of fans running in that room, if they're out and they're able to fly, turn those fans off because you don't want somebody accidentally flying into a fan. That can be very, very dangerous. Being mindful of where your other pets are as well. If you have other animals in the home, dogs, cats, ferrets, some other sort of animal, you need to be mindful of where they are. If your bird is out and it's potentially flying around where it wasn't flying around, that can also be sort of alarming to maybe a dog or a cat if they're not used to a bird flying around. And even if the dog or a cat is really good with birds, sometimes instincts kick in. So you just need to make sure, where are my other animals in the household? What is my bird doing? Are they safely secured away from one another so that there's no problems? Another thing that's really important is making sure birds are not flying into like the kitchen when you are cooking. If we have a pot of boiling water on the stove, if we have the oven on, those can be really big hazards. If there's a flame that's open on the stovetop, again, a big hazard. So best to, if you're cooking, best to just probably have your bird in its cage during those times, because again, if you're used to your bird not being flighted and now it's suddenly flighted and the bird goes, oh, look, I can fly, I'm gonna fly into wherever my mom or dad is, and you happen to be in the kitchen and you're doing something that could potentially be dangerous, maybe best to just keep them secured while you're doing those things where you can't be as observant of them at certain times.
Okay. I think we are now on to our Q&A section of the webinar.
Okay.
Thank you for all, that was good to know. Let's see if we have any questions from our participants. Let's see here. Bear with us because this is a new feature for me, at least. Let's see here. Okay, here's one. And I apologize if I don't pronounce your name correctly. It's Pritam. They say that a colleague of mine has a gray who is simply not interested in any kind of treats. He is friendly and active since he is not interested in treats at all. Training him has become a challenge. Your advice, please.
Yeah. Well, okay, so if he's not interested in treats, there's got to be something he's interested in. So, you know, a lot of times we go down the treat route because that's kind of the easiest thing to work with. But if treats aren't going to necessarily work for him, then what is it that he really enjoys? Does he really enjoy getting a head scratch as a reward? Does he really enjoy maybe like someone interacting with him and just talking with him as a reward? So, and one thing I would say about the treats thing is sometimes they're just not motivated because sometimes we're maybe feeding them too much and they're getting treats at other times of the day where they don't necessarily feel like they need to work or are too engaged in trick training because they know they're getting their treats at other times, so why do I have to work for this right now? So sometimes, you know, you can reserve things that you know they really like, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a treat. It could potentially even be a food item, you know, just like a regular pellet. Some birds love their pellets, and so if you like count out the pellets and you know that, you know, your African gray gets like 20 pellets a day, you could potentially take, you know, 5 to 7 of those pellets and save them for times when you are doing things like trick training. And it's good a lot of times when they're really motivated is first thing in the morning time, because first thing in the morning time, most birds do want to be eating some food. And so if we are first thing in the morning starting to work with them and doing training with their pellets, that can be one way to start working with them.
Okay, that's a good way of explaining that. So then we had another question from Henry. He asked if chocolate is okay for birds, and also what are the toxicities we need to be aware of during this time of COVID-19 stay at home?
Okay, so no, chocolate is not okay for birds. As a general rule, we don't really recommend it for most animals because of the potential, well, it can be a cardiac toxin. One thing to keep in mind about toxicities is it's all about dosing. And so little amounts of some sort of toxin may not actually get to a toxic point. So if an animal does accidentally get into something, the question as veterinarians we always have is, well, how much did they actually get? Did they get a level where it could potentially be toxic? So, but generally speaking, no chocolate. As far as toxicities for birds, it's really not too different now versus before this COVID-19 pandemic. I guess the one thing I would say that might be a little bit different is people are cleaning more. And with cleaning, we are using certain chemicals around our birds, or, you know, maybe I shouldn't say around our birds, but maybe more in our homes than we were before. So that would be one thing to be being mindful of. What is it that you're using to clean? Always make sure when you're cleaning that you are following the directions from that manufacturer. Because you really often need to, like for example, when you're using bleach, you need to be diluting it appropriately. If you're not diluting it appropriately, then you could potentially be more exposed to toxic fumes. When we're cleaning areas where our birds are, it's best to kind of move a bird to a different room, clean, allow things to be air dried, and then be moving them back. As far as other toxicities, though, it's going to be very similar to what was before, like food toxicities of no avocados, no pits of any fruits, apple seeds, those sort of things.
Okay, and Pritam had a follow-up question, which is, what about semi-hard cheese like cheddar? Can I use it as a treat? My gray loves it.
You know, so generally speaking, most avian veterinarians are starting to recommend less and less of any animal-based food items being offered. So that's going to be any meats, dairies, eggs to parrots. Because what we're finding maybe a lot more now than what we used to recognize is older age bird diseases. Birds are living longer. We're doing a better job of taking care of them. But now we're starting to see problems that pop up later in life, like cardiovascular disease, cholesterol levels increasing, high fat levels in the blood. And so though he may really love cheese, a little bit is going to be okay, but a lot is not going to be okay. So when it comes to those sort of items, what I would recommend is probably really keeping that to a minimum, really only using that maybe a couple times a week as a treat, and a teeny tiny little bit, not a large volume. I wouldn't make a habit of it on a daily basis, just because of if you do it on a daily basis, in the long run, you might end up causing some problems.
Okay, let's see. I think we are, let's see, it looks like we're just about at our time here. Just seeing if there's any more questions that we can answer now that are on topic. Yeah, I think we are, let's see, we're at our time here. If you have any other questions that we didn't get to today, I'm going to go ahead and screen share where you can direct those questions. Hang on one second. Share screen. Here we go. Okay. If we didn't get to any of your questions today, please try us. Send us your question at lafeber.com pet birds. Go to the pet bird tab at lafeber.com and the bird community over here, and then you hit the scroll down button and you'll see the Ask Lafeber. When you go there, you can submit your question and we will get to it there.